Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our latest Broadcast Revolution event, which is coming live today from a very festive-looking office here in Portland Place in central London. I know it's only July, but we are talking about Christmas today, and especially we're looking at how brands need to think now to make sure their Christmas campaigns stand out. My name is Ashley Carroll. I'm the head of newsroom here at Broadcast Revolution. Before I joined the company around 3 years ago, I spent 12 years at Global, producing on LBC and LBC News, as well as writing and reading the news on stations like Capital, Radio X and Heart, which is where one of today's guests is from. Pete May is creative producer on Heart Breakfast with Jamie Theakston and Amanda Holden. Pete's been part of the Global family for just over 7 years now. You started as a producer for Heart in Devon and Cornwall.
That's right.
Yeah, and you had your own show on a Sunday there.
You've been scrolling my LinkedIn.
I've been doing my research. I'm a journalist, it's what we do. Yeah,
that's right.
And alongside working on Heart Breakfast, you also produce 3 global original podcasts. My Therapist Ghosted Me, Vogue and Amber, and Never Live It Down.
Yeah, well done for getting that last one. That's pretty new.
I know, right? How's that one going?
Really good, yeah. We'll find out properly tomorrow when we get our figures how it's actually going. But yeah, you've done the place up.
It looks good, right?
Yeah, what you might not be able to see is there's a little potted plant there, and it's rested on 24-day Ultimate Elf on the Shelf Ideas kit. So the entire room's Christmassy, even the bit you can't see.
We tried to get some tinsel on the guys as well. I didn't quite get that far, but I tried to make it slightly more festive.
Actually tried to peddle us with a mulled wine as we came in as well.
It's probably a good thing we didn't do the mulled wine.
That's right.
Sitting alongside Pete is Jonathan Hallewell. Jonathan, you were at the BBC for 35 years, which is insane, working across Radio 4, Radio 5 Live, Radio 3, BBC Radio Manchester and BBC Radio Merseyside as well. You spent many years producing You and Yours and ran its editorial planning there. And at Radio 4, you also produced and edited the religion and ethics output on the Radio 4 Sunday programme.
That's right.
Incredible. Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas, Ash. Thanks so much.
We're getting festive. Thank you for everyone who's joined us this afternoon. Hope you'll get in the festive spirit as well. If you would like to ask Pete and Jonathan a question, please do so. Just pop them in the Zoom chat. We'll make sure that they are read out. Also, midway through our chat today, a poll's going to appear on your screen. There's just a few questions on there, but please do answer them, as they really are super useful in helping us shape our future events. Thanks for joining us, guys. I think, Pete, firstly, I'd like to say congrats on the latest Radar figures. Heart is the UK's biggest commercial brand with 13.4 million weekly listeners, which is an incredible achievement.
Yeah.
What do you think the success is down to?
Do you know what? God, how long you freaking got? How long is this thing?
We've only got about 45 minutes, and we need to talk about Christmas.
Oh, yeah. Well, I could talk about this till Christmas, but truthfully, it's the fact that everyone at Heart wants to be at Heart. We've all got a laser-like focus on our jobs. We're all really passionate. No one there just goes through the motions. We're always thinking about the next thing. How can we be bigger? How can we bring more? Here's what we did last time. What can we do that's cooler? What does the past look like? What does the future look like? And to be honest, it's everyone just turning up to work and really caring. We all just care so much about the output. We all stay an hour, 2 hours after we're meant to finish. Like, when you've got so many people like that in one office and one room, along with an amazing team of producers, an insane team of management who are just so encouraging. Like, it's just a recipe for success. And it honestly is the coolest place to work. It is the sickest radio brand to work on. And we've been sniffing at that #1 spot for absolutely
You've got it now. You've got it now. We've got the next set of Radar will be out tomorrow or Thursday. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens there. But so watch this space. I'm sure we'll be giving you guys an update as well with those latest Radar figures. But we've got Heart Musicals, Heart Love, Heart Dance. Heart
70s,
Country,
80s, 90s.
All the rest. I mean, what's left?
Yeah, I've plugged for Heart Country.
Oh, right. Is that not? I think that needs to be a thing.
Yeah, well, I do about an hour of smooth country a weekend. I love it, but we're thinking about taking over Classic FM and calling it Heartstrings. Come on! That's a joke, by the way. The world's biggest classical music radio brand.
So before we talk about Christmas, just briefly tell us about your typical day, because I guess it's a really early start being on the breakfast show.
Yes, that's right. So I'm the creative producer of Heart Breakfast with Jamie Theakston and Amanda Holden. And all of my colleagues, so my exec producer, my audio producer, my showrunner, they will all be in for the start of the show. But me, because I do the content, and content can happen round the clock. So I might be needed at 6 o'clock to record with a school full of kids. Or I might need to go at Christmas, we might go out to a school and record like an evening performance. So that means I need to get in a little bit later. So my start time is anywhere between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. And truly what I do is I look at what's on the show the next day and I think, right, when do I need to be in? I just generally add about 10 hours and think, right, I'll shoot for that as a finish time. So yeah, like this week I've been in for 6:30. Next week will probably be 5 a.m. So yeah, the sleep pattern's cooked. Like it's hard to get into a rhythm, but to be honest, you don't need one. Like it's always fun no matter what time you show up. And every May we give away £1 million and it's not, uncommon to see me in that office at 3. Printing stuff out, man spreading all over the printer, getting in the early stuff. So yeah, there is no typical day really. We just meet with the team. We do the show from 6:30 to 10. So the vast majority of us are in studio throughout the whole thing. We keep the vibe up with Jamie and Amanda and Ashley Roberts, who comes in once an hour. So we have producers that help her out. Then it's just what's on the show at that moment. Could be a competition, could be a contributor, a caller, a feature, a game. Tomorrow we're giving away £150,000. So it's just an insane amount of variety. And truthfully, you are where you need to be. And one of your talents as a producer is knowing where you need to be. Where am I going to be helpful right now? Do I need to be in studio for this bit? Or can I be working on something for tomorrow's show at this time? So that's what I've just always got to be thinking about.
Yeah.
Like tomorrow, I don't know where I'm going to be at this time. I sort of know where I'll be during show hours, but yeah, it's just planning for the next few week shows really.
So the reason we're talking about Christmas today with you both is because actually it's the time traditionally when PRs start thinking about their campaigns. But Pete, for you, when does Christmas actually start on Heart? Is it the 1st of December?
God, no.
No?
What do you take us
November?
for? Absolutely not. Well, if you listen to Heart, you'll know that usually Christmas songs start in mid-November. So, you can back time that. But truthfully, like when we get to January, we're thinking, okay, cool, that's Christmas wrapped. What does next Christmas look like?
Wow, okay.
We know what we did last Christmas and what we want to do next Christmas. Then we sort of move through the year and honestly, we get Christmas briefs in, especially for bigger things like competitions and really bigger activities. We're talking like April.
Gosh, okay.
April time on Heart, because Heart at Christmas is an absolute juggernaut of broadcast. Like people leave other radio stations to tune into Heart at Christmas because it's what we do. Christmas is a feel-good time, and at Heart we turn up the feel-good. It's a good slogan, that actually. And honestly, our branded content team will just pull up a sign and be like, "Hey, listen, we've got a brief in for Christmas. Let me run this idea by you." So it never stops.
Yeah. Wow.
And if you ever tune into Global Player, you'll realise that Heart Christmas never stops. It's picking up slowly, and as Mariah defrosts, so does our attention into Christmas. But yeah, like by the 1st of November, everyone's in full Christmas. But then the sort of 6 months preceding that, we'll just get busier and busier, more and more Christmas chat.
So you guys really are probably always thinking about Christmas.
Oh yeah.
But for Jonathan's, for a programme like you and yours, are you that prepared? I don't know if you can be as prepared.
We don't quite start planning it in January. But it is different. In a news or journalistic environment, there are still big reasons why you need to plan well in advance. So I suppose typically on a programme like you and yours, when I was looking after the planning desk there, I'd be well into thinking about it in September. Okay. And the reasons are, lots of reasons. The news diary is normally empty over Christmas. And we can talk about that later because that's a great opportunity, of course. But it also means that you actually have to plan your content. You can't be too reactive. You can't just bank on stuff coming up in the few days before Christmas. The other thing is that people like being off. People like taking leave. And that can mean, in terms of staffing and resourcing, it's a bit harder to run. The other thing is that for quite a lot of BBC outlets, at times, you will pre-record programmes. So there are some programmes, and occasionally we do this on You and Yours, a programme that is, everyone's used to it being a live show every day. We would pre-record it or record some of those programmes over Christmas period. And sometimes there might be a special programme. Now, if you're going to do a special themed programme based around one subject, that needs some serious thinking about and some serious planning ahead.
I think what actually would be really useful for those who are watching who might not be aware, could you just give a brief synopsis about you and yours? Because I guess it's very different to Heart.
It's very different, yeah. I mean, of course, Radio 4, it's all-speech station. You and Yours sits in the middle of the day. It used to run Monday to Friday with the phone in on a Tuesday. It's now not quite the full week. It's sort of Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Monday, Tuesday, forget what days it is. It's not every day of the week. But it's a consumer affairs programme, so it's all about investigating consumer issues. It's very audience-driven, so literally listeners are getting in touch all the time with their consumer wrangle or problem, and we'll investigate it. Often we're going into battle on behalf of listeners against either big corporate organisations or against local authorities or government or whatever. So there's a lot of journalistic legwork involved in bringing those stories to air. And it's going out week in, week out, right across the year. So there's a decent-sized team who are working on that day in, day out.
And how do you decide which Christmas-related topics appear on You and Yours each year?
It's such a good question. I mean, sometimes there is news, of course. Having said that news doesn't happen at Christmas, there's still, what's in the zeitgeist? What are people talking about? What are the big stories journalistically and consumer-wise? And of course, we'd want to cover those stories. But sometimes what we do is we might just pick a theme that we know has been massive that year, or we think is going to be massive the year later. So, for instance, on one occasion, we just decided we were going to do a travel special. And obviously travel is a massive consumer area, whether you're talking about flights or public transport or motoring or whatever. It's a big area, editorial area. And so we gave a producer and a presenter, put them together, said, right, we're going to pre-record this programme. This was one that wasn't live. We're going to pre-record this programme perhaps a few days before Christmas, give them a bit of time off the rota to actually plan that. And it's a difficult job journalistically, because of course you've got to sort of predict. You've got to make sure that whatever you record, even if it's just a few days, isn't going to be overtaken by news, which is difficult sometimes.
Yeah,
so, the other thing is that, as is always the case with the news outlet, you don't want to tell people what they already know. And this is one of the real key principles. It's got to sound fresh. So, I mean, Christmas must be the biggest cliche in civilization. You not think? I mean, it's wall-to-wall cliches. And you have to avoid falling into those traps. So you're looking for stories that you haven't done before yourself, of course, but also stories that essentially people don't know about, something that's got something fresh about it. So we're all the time looking for things like new bits of data, new pieces of research, perhaps big substantial authoritative surveys that have been carried out, things like that, that will make a story sound fresh and give us a new way of telling it.
And then with the data and the research, what types of voices then would make it on air?
Oh, well, it's really interesting that, because I do think, in terms of thinking of the contacts we get from organisations and from public relations organisations, there's a kind of hierarchy actually in terms of the quality of what we might be offered. People plugging a product and wanting to get on Radio 4 to talk about it. These people are 10 a penny, of course. Everyone wants to be on Radio 4 talking about how great their product is. Experts, real expertise, that's more valuable, particularly if they've done some recent research, so they've got something fresh to say about the subject of their expertise. But much better than either of those two are compelling personal stories. We'd often call it case studies. Now, and it almost doesn't matter what the story is. If you have somebody who's been at the very nub of that, whose actual life has been directly affected by the story you're telling, that draws listeners to the radio. That's what makes a story really come alive. So I suppose, when you say which voices will we make on air, well, obviously we want to hear from people who've been directly affected, and then after that we want to hear from the very best expertise. But it's always easier to find an expert than to find a really, really good case study.
So actually then, for those who are watching, if there is a data or research-led study, it's about thinking about those additional assets. Who else can we offer alongside that senior voice or that expert voice? Do we have case studies? Because that's one of the ways that actually that campaign could then stand out in an inbox, maybe go to a planning diary and not a junk folder.
Absolutely right. That's absolutely right. You were talking about the ambition, that sense of ambition you get when you're building a programme. And it's exactly the same on a journalistic programme. Nobody wants to just churn out what they've done before. And nobody wants to churn out in particular what they think the listeners already know. What is the point of a news or journalism programme that tells you what you already know? So all the time we're looking for something that's going to go a bit further, or even if you're talking about a subject that's been covered before, you've got to be doing it differently and in an impactful way. You know, I often say to people, it's not enough just for your message to get across. You want it to actually land so that people are talking about it and thinking about it after the programme. Yeah. And I think if there was a single sort of trick that achieves that, I think it's that personal story. Somebody who, particularly if it's it's a story in which somebody's been very severely affected, and we can talk about that kind of thing maybe in a bit, but you know, if you were hearing a first-hand account of somebody whose life has been significantly affected by the issue you're talking about, of course, that's turned the radio up. Winifred Robinson, one of the presenters on You and Yours, used to use a phrase, she said, about an item being good or bad. She'd say, wasn't exactly Mother Come Quickly, was it? Which is, you know, that thing when there's something on the radio and it's so interesting. Yeah. You say, hang on, I can't talk to you now. Or she'd say, Mother Come Quickly. Yeah. This is on the radio. You turn it up.
Yeah.
Of course.
It's when you stay in the car, isn't it? Even though
you've
got back
home.
you're in your drive, but you stay in your car because you can't.
And of course, I mean, that's a high bar, isn't it, to try to do. I think, thinking of your ambition thing, that's what you're trying to achieve. Yeah, You'd definitely. Like to think that for every item you're doing, people are sitting in the car thinking, I can't get out because I want to hear the end of it.
And I guess Heart would want that as well, but the types of voices would maybe be slightly different. You're not maybe after that expert voice, but case study perhaps?
Yeah, usually when you say to a producer at Heart, especially someone whose job it is to basically bring the fun and the vibes, you say, oh, I've got an expert opinion. You go, oh, great, an expert. Honestly, so yeah, it's we all want people to sit next to the radio and not be able to tune out, but we might achieve that in a slightly different way. Yeah, we'd sort of muck around with Amanda Holden and Alan Carr in studio and have people, you know, sat in the driveway like that. But yeah.
So more celebrities, perhaps for Heart, but like unusual guests?
Yeah, we love an unusual guest or two,
Slightly different, quirky.
They've got to be right, and they can't be too quirky.
Okay.
We love the weird and the wonderful, but it's got to be relatable. It's got to be familiar, because our listeners tune into Heart for a specific reason. They don't like something that's too unfamiliar and just, what on earth is this? They like to know it's somewhere where they're going to go and they're going to get it, they're going to understand it. They're going to be entertained. So yes, having something that's quirky, that's a little bit entertaining, we'd probably go for. But yeah, familiar is really important to us as well.
Pete, with Christmas stories that might come in to you from PRs, is there ever a concern, because obviously Heart is very family focused, lots of young listeners, especially during that Christmas time when schools are out for their holidays. Is there a concern with having guests on that there's an element that they might spoil the surprise of Christmas? Talking about the big man, lives on the North Pole. Yeah. Is that ever a kind of a concern when you're having guests on?
We haven't got any kids watching, have we?
Well, just in case we do, in case it's summer holidays, in case there's any in the background. I know what it's like with working parents at the moment. It's a juggle, so with our big man in the North Pole.
Well, listen, he's a busy guy.
He's busy.
And
just got to be careful.
We can't say anything that a young ear might fall onto, and we can't ruin anything.
Absolutely.
No, and our listeners aren't afraid to tell us. You know, they hold us accountable for, hey, you made this comment, by the way. Sorry, I'm just going to say it. Sometimes we might imply that we do the Christmas shopping. And we are like, hang on a sec.
Yeah.
Whoa. The big man in the North Pole, like you say, he does the Christmas shopping. And especially on the show that I produce, Heart Breakfast, you know, we're on our 6:30 to 10. That's peak school run. We've got so many kids listening. If you think about a mum driving 3 kids to school, that's a ratio of 3 to 1 kids to adults. It's such a consideration, honestly, And we've always got the dump button, don't forget.
I was going to say, you've got the dump button, so that means you can drop any audio that... So just explain for those who are watching what that actually does.
Yeah, so our dump button is actually a sick piece of technology. So at the start of the show, one producer has to go one side of the desk and the other has to go the other. And we go 3, 2, 1, and we push these 2 buttons at the same time. And that builds a delay of 30 seconds into the Heart network. The reason why it's 2 buttons at the same time is so you can't accidentally knock it and accidentally put yourself into delay. So me and this geezer called Matt, we go the other side of the desk, we put it into delay. That basically means that whatever gets said in the studio, you've got 30 seconds of grace before the listener hears it. So let's say someone drops a swear or for some reason, for whatever reason, might imply that, you know, something's different to what it is around Christmas. We go, and we hit a dump button, and it deletes the last 10 seconds of audio. So it takes us from a 30-second delay to 20-second delay, meaning that 10 seconds just floats off into some random inbox somewhere and never gets broadcast.
But what does the output say? For those that are listening at home, they have no idea, or could they tell that something's a bit off? It's
a great question, because the keener listener would go, oh, that was weird. Yeah. What was that?
Right,
but before, by the time they thought that,
yeah,
it's back to normal. If you think about if you have a 30-second piece of audio and it's in 3 10-second chunks, if you get rid of that middle 10 seconds and then splice it together, be normal, 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 split-second jump, then normal, 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 normal. So the average listener is just listening to, you know, usually we talk over like music beds, competitions, a few different voices. It's very easy to disguise, especially to like the casual listener. But it's funny because all of us like meerkats in the office, whenever we hear a dump, we all just recognise it instantly. And it's always good goss trying to get into that inbox where all the dumped audio goes. But yeah, that's how our dump operates basically. And then at the end of the show, when we want to take it out of delay, we've got to get around the other side of the desk again and we go 3, 2, 1, exit delay like that, yeah. And then it slowly takes it back to normal for the daytime shows.
It's really fascinating.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's because you don't, unless you work in radio, you don't really think about these things. So it's great to have that insight.
It's actually sick. Yeah, I got no idea who created it, but it's awesome. And sometimes you do get, I hope my boss isn't listening, but you do get 10 minutes into the show. You go, oh Christ, we ain't done the delay. So sometimes before 7, you've got to go get around the other side of the desk and smash it into delay.
Jonathan, would it be the same for BBC Regional, just a concern about children listening at Christmas, and then again with any kind of festive campaigns, you might need to be slightly aware
absolutely.
of output?
I mean, that is the big story, isn't it, at Christmas? And we make sure we get it right. We don't have the luxury of a dump button, by the way.
Yeah, do you know what?
No, we don't. So,
sweet.
So I mean, obviously, what that means is, don't cock it up in the first place. You have to be really, really careful.
Would pre-records maybe?
Well, obviously, if there's a pre-record, then you can correct it.
Then you know.
But if on a live programme, you've just got to get it right. And if it's somebody, that's why occasionally on a BBC live programme, if somebody says something a bit inappropriate, maybe a swear word or something, the presenter would normally cut in or would respond, or maybe say something a bit, either just say,
sorry about that sort of vibe.
Yeah. Something like that, just to sort of, so the listeners understand what's happened, but we don't actually, dump.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
And that's, you've watched those great blooper reels on YouTube. I love them. It's like part 8 and it's 40 minutes long.
The difference is you've got a blooper file. Our bloopers actually did come out on air.
Shall I leak it for the next meeting? Shall I get together a little audio package and we can play it?
That's what we normally do when people are leaving as well. It's like, here's your bloopers from throughout the year. There you go.
Yeah. We dumped Lewis Capaldi recently.
For swearing? Or,
for swearing, because we've in the studio, in the Heart Breakfast studio, everyone that's on camera has a little monitor in front of them that you can see what you look like on camera. And we go, right, mics are going live in 10 seconds. And Lewis looks at his monitor and the mics are live and he goes, I look like a vampire.
Oh no.
So he looked in the camera and started slagging himself off. But that was the second the mics went live. So we know we've got 30 seconds till the listener hears it. And it's just one click of a button.
You've got to be on it and you've got to react quickly, definitely.
Effortless though, it's actually easy, yeah.
Jonathan, you touched upon it at the beginning of the chat where you were talking about getting spokespeople actually on air during December. Do you find it is harder because a lot of organisations might want to shut shop early, people want time off? Is it harder to get those voices on air?
Yeah, it's harder to get the very best people who you want to get on. The people who want to come on the radio will come on the radio anyway, but the harder ones are harder. That's why we plan in advance. And I suppose what I'd say is that just underlines the importance of pitching well ahead of time. If you've got a story, do let us know well in advance. And if you're really keen to get your story onto a particular outlet and you're not sure what their planning process is like, just ask them, because it's in everyone's interest for everyone to know what everyone's doing. And if you know that a particular maybe radio station or particular programme has its planning process starting at a particular time, it means you can plan accordingly. I would say, Christmas is a fantastic time in some ways. It's a golden opportunity potentially for people working in PR because the news diary is so empty. but don't imagine that means that the bar's just going to drop and you can get any old stuff on the radio. It's just not true.
So I guess as well, we might be feeling festive over Christmas, but actually it is a perfect time just to make sure that spokespeople, when they're going on air, they don't take their foot off the pedal slightly, and actually they can still get those tricky questions. Oh. They can still get a bit of a grilling if it's needed. Just because it's Christmas, it doesn't mean the gloves are off.
I mean, a few basics. Look, at Christmas, first of all, make sure that not only is your speaker actually available, and so you're not going to let down the radio station, but also that you're available. So that if there is a problem, then maybe the station or the programme has to change plans, they can get in touch with you and change arrangements. So make sure of that. The other thing is, I can sometimes feel that people working in PR can sort of measure their success according to how many hits they get, how many stations or how many programmes can they get their guest onto. And I'd urge you to think quality. How did they actually perform? And I think, and that's good for the programme as well as for the actual client you're working with, of course. And things like, overplugging your brand, just don't do it. Overplugging a brand name, it's the kiss of death. Not only does it make you sound a bit of a prat, the presenter can see through it, the listeners can see through it, you won't get invited back on.
And I guess it's what we do here is we always make sure before we put guests on Heart or on any BBC radio station that we'll do that briefing before. We'll tell them it's one brand mention only, because at the end of the day, we want them to do an excellent job, but then we need to keep that relationship with you guys really strong, because we don't want to then be offering someone on air that then plugs their brand 50 times. You guys might get a telling off from Ofcom, we get a telling off, and that's just not how it works. Is it the same with you, Pete, with brand mentions? One brand mention only?
God, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fewer the better. It's like that scene when Alan Partridge has to plug the Terry's chocolate oranges. You've seen that? And he has to shoehorn in as many mentions as he can. Yeah, it's just an anti-listen, it's just the opposite of what we want. And when they're done well, you do get some contributors that just do it really well, and it's sandwiched in between something interesting and something interesting, and the brand mention makes it to air. And like you say, no one really sees through it, but it's a great mention and it happens and it's part of a normal conversation.
I think people accept it, don't they? The worst thing actually is if the brand that's been plugged is actually not even related to the story, but it's just a sponsor. Then it's utterly ridiculous.
I agree.
I mean, you can see why the Alan Partridge gig works. To mention something that's unrelated. Now it's really wearing even once. Right, so then say it again, it's just be utterly transparent why you're on the radio. And listeners don't like it, and so producers don't like it.
Yeah, and if you were chatting to your mate in the pub, you wouldn't keep mentioning, let's say it's Lad Bible that you're plugging. You would go, guess what, I saw on Lad Bible the other night, and then when I went onto Lad Bible, there was this Lad Bible article. And you go, what are you doing? Shut up! Yeah, so just keeping it natural and conversational, it's easier said than done. But it's entirely possible, and there is a really great way to do it. There's a right way and there's a wrong way.
And I guess the great way would be just keeping it organic, having that relevance as well. Yeah,
absolutely.
I want to talk to you both about Twixmas. Before I do, just to those of you who are watching, any minute now, a short poll is just going to appear on the screen. While you're listening, if you could just answer the questions, there's only a few, it would be super helpful just in helping us shape our future events. Christmas, that time between Christmas and New Year, no one quite knows what they're doing, what day it is, what food they're eating. BBC Regionals, how does it work as well with the programming? Do you have tend to have different presenters in? Are you still talking as much? Is there any difference during that Twixmas period?
Most of the time in BBC local radio, they still have live output. There might be some pre-recorded stuff, but most of it will still be live. And it is an opportunity for people to play stories because it is much harder to find stories. And so I think, but you mentioned the time between Christmas and New Year, and that's not an obvious thing. Because when we're talking about planning ahead of Christmas, you think Christmas, don't you? You think Christmas trees, elves, presents, all that stuff. But anything that just says Christmas quite too loudly starts to feel a bit rubbish once you get back to Boxing Day.
Yeah.
And there's a whole week between Christmas Day, which we understand in our mind, what it means culturally, and New Year again, which we understand. And it's a bit of a sort of funny time, isn't it, between the two? And what I'd say is that when you're placing, news stories or journalistic stories, don't assume the bar is particularly lower. All the time be adding quality. A bit like what you were talking about earlier about, making sure you've got a case study, making sure you've got some fresh, some data. I'd actually say that if you have got a story that's got data and a good case study, that period between Christmas and New Year is a particularly good time to offer it. If it's a local or regional outlet, obviously if the case study, or the expert, but particularly the case study, if they're from that region, if they're a local person, that's even more golden. You can imagine if you're a local radio producer and you're offered a story that's got some new data on a subject of interest, and we've got a case study who's been directly affected by it, and they're local. I mean, what's not to like? I suppose the trick is, isn't it, is to think like a radio producer. And, and I suppose it sounds a bit mean, but to accept that in a way they only really like working with you insofar as you can provide them with something that will make their programme sound great and therefore make them sound great, And if you get into that mindset, what would make this more special? Showing the kind of ambition you were talking about, what could make it even better, then I think you're much more likely to succeed. And it's not just succeeding once, of course, because, all of us who've worked on news desks, or on news or journalistic programmes, we've become aware of, press people who are just very good, who are tuned into what we do. Just another thought while it's on my mind is, it might seem blindingly obvious, but before pitching a story to a particular outlet or programme, make sure you've listened. Make sure you know what it is they actually do. And people, because we get so many emails, there's so much noise in my inbox, that it only takes sort of 2 or 3 emails from somebody when they plainly haven't listened to the programme because they're offering something I'd never take. On the 4th occasion, I might press delete without even opening it. Now, obviously that's
Say it louder for the people at the back, honestly.
It's a problem. And I'm not, it sounds unsympathetic. I'm not being unsympathetic. It's just that life is very busy, of course, when you're working, you're under pressure to fill your programme.
And you're getting emails from
loads of stuff.
Probably hundreds of PRs on a daily basis, not even thinking about Christmas, which I'm sure is probably busier than other times of the year. But this is a constant thing for you guys.
Yeah. I mean, if there's one takeaway from this that a potential PR might be watching, it's, know the target audience of the station that you're emailing. God, if you offer some politician or chancellor for, oh wow. That's delete without reading. That's such a good point.
It's very important. Whereas on you and yours, Chancellor would be great, thanks very much.
Send them over to Radio.
He's the woman actually, holding the purse strings of the country.
Get it in that inbox.
Exactly. So don't put it in your inbox.
Literally, but that's half the talent, It's half the skill, is knowing who's going to receive this well, who's not.
And it is hard, because I know if you've got a story, you want to put it out there, but the scattergun approach just doesn't work, because you get used to getting stuff that's not right for you.
And could that Twixmas period for maybe you and yours work as, or even BBC Regionals, work as a good time for organisations to do reports looking at trends, looking back at the year we've just had, looking forward to the next year?
Honestly, they're fine. We normally do our own of those, of course, because we've got oodles of content and we've got our own experts looking forward. I think that, I mentioned earlier that Christmas is the most cliched time of year. I think in journalistic content, it's a good idea to try to be counterintuitive, to not just lean on tired old Christmas tropes. So, items about, most popular present this year, the most popular kids' toy this year, dysfunctional families, embarrassing, awful family get-togethers. No thanks. A discussion about, is Christmas becoming over-commercialised? You'd need an absolutely fantastic guest to make those stories sing, because they're such familiar ideas. They're literally things you can turn off because you will have already heard them, probably last year and the year before and the year before that. So I suppose, it's an easy thing to say and a hard thing to do. I recognise that. But try not to lean in too much to Christmas cliches and think, what's a different take? I was thinking about, lots of people celebrate Christmas who, I worked in religious broadcasting for a while. Lots of people celebrate Christmas who are not from Christian backgrounds. So how do they mark it and why and how do they feel about it? Like, most Muslims don't celebrate Christmas, but some find a way of marking it. That's interesting, isn't it? Because most of us haven't thought about that before. So you take the point. What hasn't been spoken about Christmas? And the other thing is, it might sound really obvious, is just because it's Christmas, it doesn't have to be a Christmas story.
Right, okay.
It really doesn't. A good story is a good story. I think sometimes there's a feeling I've picked up sometimes when I've worked in conjunction with charities, that they can sort of feel that this is our time. It's the season of goodwill, for heaven's sake. And they might expect a more wide open door to stories that are related to giving or generosity. And I think it's really difficult because the truth is that it's a very, very crowded marketplace, the charity sector, and as is my inbox, charity, charity emails. So you've still got to find those ways of looking a little bit better. You know, homelessness charity thinks, oh, well, it's Christmas, great time to do homelessness. Could you provide us with a homeless person to speak on the programme? Oh, no, I'm sorry, our client base don't speak to us, we can't do public appearances from the client base. Well, I might have time to find my own person, but I might not.
Yeah.
And it might die, that piece might not happen because of that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. And we're actually getting some questions through regarding charities. So this one is from an anonymous viewer. They've asked, any advice for charities sending pitches at Christmas? What makes a strong charity pitch, considering so many other charities will be looking for media coverage this time of year?
Okay, I think, I'm going to say, I've covered this a little bit already, but I think how topical is it and how zeitgeisty is it? And if it isn't immediately obvious why it is, see if you can think of a way. There might have, for instance, have been, I don't know, a change in legislation over the last year, or some development in the story that didn't get that much attention in the news, but is significant to your particular area, your charity area. So, yeah, making sure it feels topical and relevant. Case study, please. Even if you've got a choice of case studies, even better. There's nothing actually more important than that, if I'm honest about it. Certainly for BBC outlets, where sometimes an expert on their own just isn't enough. So that's really important. And new data. Now, it's difficult, this, I know. What counts as good enough data? We get a lot of surveys, but, you know, an online survey of 1,000 people doesn't really cut it. So it makes it harder for us to say yes. If you've got, I would say even a sort of 2,000-3,000 survey, I'd be looking at the methodology. Or I'd be asking you, if it's not on the press release, I'd be asking. And you'd be surprised, quite often you'd get these and you look at them and they're self-selecting people online. No, thank you. Not interested. Your survey doesn't represent anything. On the other hand, there are some really high quality surveys that have been done. So surveys can work if they're good enough quality. Any actual research, you know, this is where if you can get into bed with an academic or somebody who's done some proper work and they're willing to and able to release it at a particular date that can be worked on, that's great data. And so, you know, you're telling us something new about a story that's really important, and we've got a case study talking about why it's important. And then after that, you know, we're happy to hear from the charity and about their campaign. Can I just mention a little principle that might be helpful in this?
Of course, yeah.
Somebody said to me once that there's two considerations. So what and who cares? And they're the two things you don't want the journalists, the producers to say to you. But it's worth thinking about what they mean. So what is a measure of how significant is this? So when you're planning your pitch and you're writing your release, make sure the actual significance of this to ordinary people, to everybody, to the community, to the country, is there. And you've articulated that properly. The other thing, who cares, is really interesting, because who cares is about the emotional content. Now look, if the story is just really funny, well, you're there, aren't you? Something that's funny is great. We'll always say yes to something that's genuinely funny. But maybe it's just a really sad and difficult story, something that will pull on the heartstrings, and so it will score well on who cares. And I'd suggest, if you're putting out a press release, think to yourself, how high does my pitch score in terms of who cares and in terms of so what? You've got to be high on at least one. If they're both quite low, you're not going to get on the radio probably. I mean, the funny thing, you know, talking about stuff that is funny, I remember years ago, the Asda supermarket used to have a brilliant press office when they were in Leeds, and I remember they did a story once, it was during the World Cup, and they put out a thing saying that Asda stores were going to open a creche for men. Right, and the idea was you don't drop your kid off when you go to the supermarket. You go to the supermarket, you drop off your husband or your boyfriend so you can sit on this sofa watching the telly. Now, of course, it was just an old sexist trope, but it was funny.
Yeah.
You know, and I think they said
people are probably talking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what
they probably set it up in one store for the TV cameras to get some pictures of it. But that's the point I'm making, is that if something's genuinely funny, that's probably will get you over the line. Most stories are, most are more serious. So if you've got a case study giving us the emotional appeal, lots of who cares. But also you've got some actual facts, some data, so lots of so what about it, then you're more likely to succeed.
It's probably worth just putting "so what" and "who cares" on a post-it by your laptop. So when you're writing your press releases, having those front of mind would probably really help shape an advisory or press release.
Exactly. What have you put in your release that means that the person who receives it is not going to say either of those two things?
Definitely.
It'll be obvious.
Another question we've had is there a particular type of guest that gets easily fatigued around Christmas?
Ooh. It's a great question. There are a load of Christmas cliches that we'd want to avoid. And to be honest, if it's interesting, then we'll generally go for it. I'm trying to think if there is anything that we'd actually just instantly look at and go, no, that's really tired. But no, it's just keeping it interesting. I'm trying to think of an example of a guest that will be fatigued.
I don't think it's so much the guest that's fatigued. It's the idea usually that's fatigued. It's like I'm saying about the examples of stories I gave. About people having arguments within the family.
Yeah. The top 10 Christmas gifts are the same as last year.
The fact that nobody likes sprouts. I mean, it's not funny anymore. It's never really funny. But so I think it's more just clapped out old ideas that people have already heard. It's a bit like a joke you've heard too many times.
Yeah, like a Christmas cracker joke. And you used the word zeitgeist a couple times, and that's so true. So last year, we might have spoken about the top 10 Christmas gifts, and here's a list of the 10. Well, that was last year. What's this year? What's the right here? What's the right now? Why couldn't we do this next Christmas or last Christmas? Yeah, those evergreen stories you generally see once, see twice, and go, okay, cool, we've done that before. Especially on a decent station that you actually want to be on. They're just going to check the box, done that, what's next? Yeah, so, a list of the UK's top 10 Christmas songs would be pretty fatigued, because it's going to be Mariah and Slade and all that gaff. Keeping it fresh. Yeah. Keeping it fresh to Christmas. This year, we'll be thinking about Christmas 2025. Next year will be 2026, and it's making it relevant to right now, tapping into the zeitgeist pretty much.
And flexibility of spokespeople, I guess that's got to be key for you guys as well, because as you said, December, it might be harder to get voices on air, but really you might not want them on Boxing Day because there's news happening, or you've already got a celebrity coming on to promote something. Can we get them the next day or the next day after? I think that's really key during that, especially that Twixmas period.
That can be a big thing in journalistic programmes, because as you say, there may not normally be much news at Christmas, but then of course you can plan for that, but then there is a news story, a particular item has to be held. Is the guest available tomorrow? No, they're not. I've lost an item, I've got a gap in my programme, and I only found out 3 days before Christmas when everyone's on leave and nobody's answering the phone. That's not very nice. So that means that I'm not feeling very pleased with that PR, because they should have checked that this person was available. I think there's also something about communicating to clients about quite what the value is of what you're getting. I mean, I felt that very keenly on Radio 4. It's a big audience of, it's the home of intelligent speech in the UK, really. A lot of opinion formers in the audience. If you can get yourself on Radio 4, then that is a very, very significant thing to have. So, how about being flexible on what day you do it? It's not a big ask, I think.
Yeah. Sometimes it never even makes it beyond the when are they available question, because they go, we've got this amazing person, they're on to chat about something really cool. And we go, great, when are they available? They go, Wednesday at 9:20.
Cool, you get that,
cool, I'm out then. Yeah. It's literally like Dragon's Den. You go, cool, I can't do it, I'm out. Yeah. Having someone flexible is it sounds stupid, doesn't it? Because it sounds so entry level. Yeah. But God, it's so key. And it's actually quite rare. And we're on air from 6:30 to 10. We've probably got 2 slots we can offer you generally. We like to pre-record a lot of the chats with these PRs just to monitor things like over mentions and make sure it's the right length. A bit of brevity never hurt anyone. And we generally have a few little slots where we can pre-record, but maybe you're talking 1 or 2 across a 3.5-hour show, in amongst all of our live items.
Yeah.
No.
The other thing is, it's worth having a proper conversation. Of course, when you're selling a particular story, you're full of what the detail is of your story and the story you want to tell. But it's good to interrogate the producer about what they think they're going to get out of it. What do they want out of the item? Because, it's easy for me to say, I don't just want a guest who's available, I want one who's great. Of course you always want guests who are great. But it's important, of course, but I think people know that. Yeah. You want a good performer, and that's where media training can help with that a little bit as well. But it's also, thinking about other detail, things like that as well. Yeah.
Would it help as well that if a PR picks up the phone and speaks to you guys and says, we've got this, what can we do to make it work for Heart Breakfast or for a show like you and yours?
I love it when people say that.
Really?
Yeah, I do, because, I mean, it can often still lead to, actually, I don't think the fit's right.
Yeah.
That's okay, that's good business. I mean, it might have been, but it wasn't. But at least it's an honest conversation. And, like, you know, if I, as a producer, had been asked, like I said, you know, well, what are you hoping to get out of this item? And I explain, and the PR's thinking, oh, this guest doesn't really do that. Then they've got to be honest about that. You know, don't try to shoehorn a square peg into a round hole. You know what I mean? It won't work. So it's really important to know what it is that you know that the person is going to be able to provide what it is that's actually desired and is wanted. Otherwise, everyone's disappointed at the end.
Yeah. And that's like our job as producers to think, okay, here's this guest that we've been offered. How can we make that work for our show? So what you originally had in mind might not work, but then I can go, okay, actually this angle would work. We can tweak it a bit this way, all depending on what's going on that time of year, what's going on the show in that week. Yeah, so we're able to tweak it a little bit. So I love being asked, look, how can we make this work for you? Here's what we've got. How can we get it in your door? And then we can come up with a fun way that keeps us happy, keeps you happy, just makes everyone happy, really, especially on Christmas.
So if planning for Christmas is done stupidly early, more for Heart, September time for you guys as well, would it be a good opportunity for PRs to look at December as a way of looking at 2026 and maybe January, February, what stories they might have coming up, and actually having those conversations with you during that month as opposed to a Christmas conversation?
That's really
in
interesting.
December?
That I have noticed a sort of phenomenon, not just with PRs, but with everybody, that January is a bit rubbish, isn't it? It's a bit, because everyone's come back from leave usually.
Yeah.
So resourcefulness is a bit low. The diary's a bit empty. People, you know, so it is quite a good moment, I think. And if you've not got a fully operating team in December, then somebody in November has to be working on stuff that's going to be offered in January. No mistake. You need to be able to carry on offering material. So yeah, I agree.
So planning ahead, actually,
Yeah,
for
definitely.
PRs to think, okay, let's get Christmas done early and use that December month to actually start planning for 2026.
Yeah.
You know, those first few months and what we can offer them.
And also, you know, we're talking about planning for Christmas, but generally I would say across a lot of the things we're saying about Christmas, of course, apply across the whole year. And this is a good case. If you've got a story that you really like, maybe something that does tick some of the boxes I've said. So yes, we've got a great case study and we've got some new research that's coming out and it's about this and we think we can get you this guest. So, you know, you've got loads of positives. Okay, the story might not be going to land until end of February in March, but there's no harm in letting me know if I'm in charge of planning in the new year that that's going to come. I'll make a note of it. You know, I mean, you know, try it, you know, see if it works. And if you can spark my interest early, then I'm more likely to say yes later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And at Christmas, talk to me about Valentine's Day. On Valentine's Day, talk to me about the summer, and then guess what? Summer, talk to me about Christmas.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Getting ahead is so important, because one of the most annoying things is when they go, oh, we've got this person available tomorrow. And you go, sweet, tomorrow's show's sorted. We're done. So I want to be hearing about Valentine's Day at Christmas. I really do. Because, yeah, any producer worth their salt's got a planning calendar, right? And we go, right, here's what's on the show in February, you know, Valentine's week. And that'll be blank now. But if I get an offer for Valentine's week, I go, that'll be sick.
Yeah.
I could pop that in now. Yeah, so never think something's too early, even if you were to go, do you know what? I've got a little something for Halloween, you know, in July. Great, get it over.
It's so interesting you mentioned Valentine's Day, and it highlights the difference between our different outlets.
Yeah.
Because everyone's thinking of something like you and yours. I mean, obviously Valentine's Day is a big consumer thing, but I'm thinking, oh God, it's got to be good. If it's about Valentine's Day, it's got to be really good. Usually on Valentine's Day, on you and yours, there will be no mention of Valentine's Day. And that's because...
Yeah, why?
Well, we you know, it's a thing, isn't it? We all know what happens, and it's pretty predictable, and usually nothing particularly new happens from from a newsworthy point of view. So the bar's really high on Valentine's Day. Having said that, there are few subjects more interesting in the world than dating, even when it's other people. I mean, ideally, dating, if it's yourself, is the most interesting thing in the world, isn't it, literally? But even other people's dating is quite interesting. So even with a subject like Valentine's Day that could maybe feel a bit well-worn, how on earth am I going to turn this into a story? If I was a PR, I'd be thinking, it's round again. What have we got? You know, you never know. It's worth thinking about, sort of thinking, I haven't got an idea that would get this on the radio, but if I did, what would they be talking about? Almost think of it backwards. What would they be talking about? What would be great and entertaining? And I suppose, I'm just mentioning dating, you know, insights about what happens when people go dating, what it feels like. That's the most interesting thing, what it feels like when you're on a first date, say. So it may be that that's the way you can work backwards and construct something that looks like an innovative, an arresting and surprising treatment of the whole Valentine's Day cliche. With me?
Yeah.
So it's not a cliche, it's fun.
But also, like, if they were to say, look, I know it's December, but I've got this Valentine's Day thing. Here's what I've got. It's my job. I work on the show. You know, I'm the one that comes up with ideas for the show. So if I get a blank slate of a guest that's cool to talk about anything, then I can really have fun with that. So there's never stress if we get someone who doesn't have a solid plan in place, because I can come up with one. You can come up with one. Yeah. It's really easy. That's the fun bit of the
I'm
job.
not sure about all-purpose guests.
Yeah.
I don't think that we quite have them. But, yeah.
We'll take them.
We have a few more questions coming through. One anonymous viewer has asked, are there any themes in particular that resonate with your audience?
What, just generally or at Christmas?
Well, let's go general.
Well, do you know what? Heart's got a few biggies. Kids, pets, food, and Christmas. That's what our audience care about. Those pretty much the 4 pillars. Like, you know, if you're going to do a text on any of those, all of our listeners really care about it. It's familiar, it's feel good, it sparks feelings in all of those. There's lots of emotion tied into those 4 subjects. Those pillars.
Christmas is just one of them. That's
Christmas
incredible.
is a biggie, yeah. Our audience love Christmas. So, yeah, if it was for the Heart brand, I'd say any of those, really. Yeah, the 4. Points for remembering, if you ever pitch anything.
Yeah, it's not like that on Radio 4.
No.
I mean, you know, we don't just have 4 things. I would say that in consumer affairs, there is a bit of that. Obviously, Christmas is a time for spending money, and so it's a big time for consumer. But, I mean, I suppose it's a bit like what I was saying before, listen to the outlet, and that gives you the answer to the question. You know, it is the home of intelligent speech. So what have you got that's new, that's interesting? So people are interested in politics. People will listen and stick with a guest who's not that, you know, it doesn't quickly spark your interest, but if they've got something really interesting to say. People who've got genuinely fresh insights on well-established stories. I mean, that's what you want to hear. Somebody who can give a genuine analysis. Somebody who's got a first-hand experience of something that is rare. You know, I was talking about case studies. I understand that for a lot of organisations, it is hard for them to get their client group to speak. You know, charities, for instance, who are working with people who are quite vulnerable. It can be very hard. But it may be that you do find somebody who was a victim of whatever it is that we're talking about, who maybe a few years later has come through it and is able to talk in an open way about it. And that's an exceptional thing. That's like gold dust in a way. That's somebody who can give you a real insight into something that, you know, you don't normally hear about. So we really want to hear from voices we haven't heard from before, parts of the population we're not hearing from enough. I'd even go a step further and to say, certainly for BBC national outlets, people who live in places where we don't normally hear from. You know, in the BBC, there's a big campaign called Across the UK, and this is about better representing the whole breadth and glory of the United Kingdom. It's a big, varied place. And the problem is, listening to most radio, it can feel like, you know, sort of everyone lives in London sort of thing. Well, they don't. And if you can get voices and stories and perspectives onto the radio that people haven't heard before, then that actually is, as Winifred would say, mother come quickly. That is actually, listen to this person, you know. So.
We are sadly running out of time. But one final question for you both. What are the do's and don'ts for PRs when it comes to getting their campaigns on air?
Should we see if we can say it at the same time?
No, you go first, and I'll pick up.
Don't make it boring, and don't pitch something that the station that I work on doesn't care about. So don't talk to me about politics. Don't talk to Heart about war. Radio 4 might love that. Am I right in saying it? You might be
give us a
interested in
ring.
something like that. Yeah. You've got totally different places that want different things. So don't get it wrong. Don't email me about something that I'm going to see and go, okay, cool, we can't do that, instant delete. That's a don't. And a do is ask me if I think I can make it work. Say, listen, I've got this person. How can you see this fitting into your show? If I can't, then I'll say that. But if I can, then I'll get to thinking of a really fun way. So yeah, do be nice and flexible with the pitches. And yeah, I'd say that's probably my do and my don't.
I think they're really good, and I agree with you about the boring thing. There was a radio expert in America called Valerie Geller, and she used to say there's only 2 rules about making great radio, and they are: tell the truth, don't be boring. And okay, we've accepted that you've got the don't be boring message, but you know, tell the truth is also really important. You know, at the BBC we're impartial. So we're all about telling giving a breadth of perspective. And I realise that most PRs are, of course, not impartial. They're partial. They're representing a particular client. And what I say is, when you're telling your story, make sure it's true. Make sure you're not making exaggerated claims. Make sure it's credible. You'd be surprised the number of press releases I look at and I think, that is actually quite interesting, but I don't believe it.
Wow.
Now, sometimes, you know, it's sufficiently interesting that I will actually delve into it to check. But you see the point I'm making? Make sure you're on the right side of truth.
Make it entertaining as well.
There we go.
Make it something that our listeners will care about.
Well, hopefully, I was going to say, this has been entertaining and funny. Lots of great insights. Pete May, Jonathan Hallewell, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
We're going to have a bit of a break in August, but we'll be back for our next event on the 18th of September. That will have a financial focus. We'll be looking ahead to the autumn statement, and we'll be chatting with the legendary Ian King. So please keep an eye on your emails. We'll send you more info on that soon. For now, though, thanks for watching.